it's sometimes presented as if it's a cliff that we're going to fall off if we, emit another part of per million CO2 into the atmosphere. And that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is a steadily downsloping highway, and it gets steeper and steeper and more dangerous as we continue past that highway. But if we miss, the 450 parts per million exit, it doesn't mean that we give up. We go for the 460 parts per million CO2 exit. If we miss that, and the point is that the farther we go down that highway, the worse it gets. There's still time to make sure that we do not commit to the worst potential changes in our climate.
My partner, Desi Doyen here, producer of this show and my co-host on the Green News Report, has a question, a thought for you, Michael Mann.
Hi, Mike. I had a quick question. There was a new study that published this week by Dr. Catherine Rickey and Professor Ken Caldera of the Carnegie Institute for Science. Now, if I understand the press materials correctly, this new study makes it sound like the warming effects of CO2, like if we emit CO2 today, that it's not going to take 100 years or more for that warming to be felt, that it's going to be sooner than that. And that has both, if I understand it correctly, good points and bad points. Have you had a chance to look at that study? Can you enlighten?
No, I haven't looked at this particular study, but it is certainly the case that if you put a CO2 molecule into the atmosphere, it is acting as a greenhouse gas now. And so you do increase the radiative effects of the greenhouse gases on our planet. Now, it's also true that the oceans tend to absorb some of that surface heating, and the oceans take a much longer time to warm up because they have a much greater amount of what we call thermal inertia. There's just a very large mass of ocean water, and the surface heating diffuses slowly down into the ocean, into the depths of the ocean, and so it takes a while for it to warm up. And so that actually is a somewhat of a dampening effect, that even as we increase the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, some of that heat is penetrating into the oceans, but eventually that heating saturates, and eventually we do commit to the full amount of warming associated with that CO2 addition.
Professor Mann, I've got just another minute or two here, but I want to get to this point because I think this is really actually important news. It's been kind of quiet, but I want to bring this point out. This from Climate Progress. On Sunday, Germany's biggest utility, E.ON, announced plans to split into two companies and focus on renewables in a major shift that could be an indicator of broader changes to come across the utility sector. E.ON will spin off its nuclear, oil, and gas operations in an effort to confront a drastically altered energy market. It seems to me, I'd love your thoughts on this, but this seems to me to be a rather important development. You've got a giant energy company essentially sort of segregating out its fossil fuel, the fossil fuel part of its business. Is this an important indicator of where we're going? And is this about, the concerns that assets may have to be abandoned, stranded assets, as they call it, and they're sort of trying to save themselves by doing this? Does this indicate more to come along these lines?
I do. I think this is a very optimistic sign, and there are reasons for optimism. As we've already said, this agreement between China and the U.S. to make major cuts in their carbon emissions. That's extremely significant. And now here we have this example where Germany, which is sort of somewhat ahead of much of the rest of the world right now in terms of their commitment to renewable energy, they've done something very important and very thoughtful. They've recognized that fossil fuel burning is doing damage to the planet. It's doing damage to our economy. And so you have to price that into the market. And the way that they've sort of leveled the playing field so that renewables can compete with fossil fuel energy is to take that into account by providing incentives through a feed-in tariff, so that this incentivizes wind and solar energy and geothermal energy.
And that's essentially, so people understand feed-in tariff, that's essentially a carbon tax, right?
Well, no, it's paying rooftop solar owners for generating electricity. So in Germany, they set up a policy to incentivize rooftop solar by saying, hey, rooftop solar homeowners, if you sell your energy back, we're going to give you the full retail rate.
Okay.
So, exactly. So if you've got an unlevel playing field, there are two ways to level it, right? You can either penalize one side or you can incentivize the other. And so what they're doing, and it has the same net effect as something like a carbon tax, but instead it's providing a direct incentive to non-carbon energy. And with that incentive, they have now basically achieved what's known as grid parity, which is to say that renewables are competitive with fossil fuels right now, and that will only get more so. And so, the major energy producers are looking at they're seeing the writing on the wall, and they're recognizing, as you allude to, that these fossil fuel resources are going to be stranded assets. They're going to be
worthless,
unsupportable, worthless. And so they've seen that the writing is on the wall. It isn't like this is a environmentally driven company. This is a for-profit energy company that recognizes that they will not be profitable because of this new environment if they continue to invest in fossil fuel energy. And so that paves the way. I mean, it provides a roadmap for what we need to see across the rest of the world. Now, Germany is currently meeting 30% of their energy demand through renewables. Here in the U.S., we're only meeting about 10% of our energy demand through renewables. So we're way behind Germany. We're way behind China in terms of what we're investing in renewable energy. And the question is, does the U.S. want to fall behind the rest of the world in its competitiveness because it gets left behind in this transition to a green economy?
Last question on that point, Michael Mann. If China is going under this new agreement that Obama struck recently, if China is going to meet its goals, I understand that they will have to create an entire United States worth of renewable energy in the next 16 years in order to meet that goal. A, is that possible for China? And B, if it's possible for them to create a United States worth of renewable energy in 16 years, what's stopping us from doing that?
The answers are yes, it's possible. And the second question, nothing. Nothing is stopping us other than political will. The only limitation, the only obstacle right now to tackling this problem is the political will to do it.
Once again, that would be Mr. Optimism, Dr. Michael Mann, a distinguished professor of Penn State University, author of The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars, which is now out in paperback, makes a great Christmas gift. Has a lot of happy stories in it, like those. Mike Mann, always great to talk to you, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Yeah.